So now you're in an untenable situation. Are you really going to pay taxes to two states?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is maybe you will. Without a little bit of advanced planning, there are some ways to manage the situation. We could talk about that for hours, but the devil's in the detail, and we have so many states and so many different scenarios.
Well, without further ado, tonight's lineup: Mike McIntyre, Director of Business and Government Banking at Investors Bank; Elaine Rizzo, Chief Human Resources and Learning Officer at Investors Bank, HR; Richard Goldstein, Senior Tax Principal at Berdon LLP; and Karen Bennett, Chief Human Resource Officer at Berdon LLP. First, about Investors. Headquartered in Short Hills, New Jersey, is a full-service commercial bank, member FDIC, that has been serving customers since 1926. Almost a complete century. With over $27 billion in assets and a network of over 150 retail locations, Investors delivers personalized services and products tailored to the needs of its customers, business customers, and consumers alike. Berdon LLP, founded in 1917, they are over 100 years old, is consistently ranked among the nation's top accounting and advisory firms. With over 400 professionals and staff, Berdon services include accounting, tax, financial, and management advisory services. Special thank you to Jason Bachrach, and Derek out at Investors Bank, and Matt Greco. Matt Greco, thank you also for your assistance in putting together tonight's show. On tonight's show, we will discuss HR changes and challenges caused by the pandemic, which hopefully we're on the other side, telecommuting and the way it affects his taxes, and business adjustments to the new normal. Without further ado, special thank you and welcome to our incredible lineup. Thank you and joining me here on Mind Your Business. We're going to open by turn to Mike. Mike, thank you again. It's always a pleasure to have you on. As an intro to the show, as a start, could you please share with us some of the recent changes in banking that you're seeing now in February 2022?
Great to see you. It's
yes.
always fun to be
here.
I think the biggest change right now is some of the forecasting coming out of the Fed, which is that they're going to raise interest rates in 2022. Right? We've been in a near zero rate environment for the last several years as a result of COVID, and the guidance coming out of the Fed and DC is that rates are forecasted or projected to go up as soon as the end of the first quarter of this year. And so this is becoming a new event that we're going to have to adopt as a bank, of course, and obviously as business owners. Potentially the cost of credit may go up slightly, and so these are compelling events that are going to be occurring throughout 2022. We're seeing customers looking to speed up their refinancing, given the fact that rates, if we do believe what's coming out of Washington, are going to go up, taking advantage of the historically low interest rates. And so we're seeing quite a bit of activity around refinancing. And then lastly, supply chains continue to be stressed. I mean, you go shopping these days and, shelves still have a little bit of, understaffed, and inventories remain a challenge. But, I think, for 2022, there is clearly a pivot happening on the economic side, and it's coming out of the Fed.
Now, I'm reminded with Mike's prediction here, just an important note, this episode was recorded on Tuesday, February 1st. So therefore, the federal government may or may not decide to make any specific tweaks or any, therefore always check on the latest information, especially the people that are going to be watching this in the second quarter or the third quarter. We have YouTube viewers that will watch it once it gets posted. So always check with your professionals regarding the latest information, and in general, and we're going to be talking, of course, with experts from Berdon. Always check with your financial advisor, your lawyer, your accountant about any particular issues that apply to state and local taxes. That's just a general note. Now, again, turning back to Mike, how has banking been affected as far as people working remote or in person? Because we know that Investors is a people's bank, and prides itself on retail locations, but yet many people are just asking or demanding whether to work remotely. How maybe you could just expand on that.
Well, first of all, I mean, speaking from my businesses, we continue to adapt to our customers' needs, right? These aren't decisions that are coming from me or from anybody in particular. Our customers, their expectations have evolved over the last couple of years, and so the way we are engaging with our customers continues to change, right? We've talked about this through the last couple of years. Digital engagement is a key driver for how our existing customers use the bank services every day. Our methods of marketing and how we interact with both customers and candidly prospects has also changed. It is not unusual for myself, because I'm talking to customers every day, or my bankers, to have a combination of both in-person meetings and remote meetings on the same day, right? There is a little bit of an increased level of efficiency, but this is a people business. I was out in an event last night with several hundred people. I'll be out in an event tonight with customers and prospects, but guess what? I can also, in between in-person meetings, squeeze in a 30-minute call with an accounting firm like a Berdon, like with Richard Goldstein here on this call tonight, or I can get out and speak to another prospect, outside of the territory. We've become a bit more flexible, but our customers and our prospects, and candidly, the market demands a bit more enhanced flexibility these days.
Now, Mike, before I get to Elaine, one more question here. Can you expand on the value of referrals? That's a it's known as a referral is really the best form of marketing, because it means someone who you touched is then referring someone else. Yep. So therefore, it's in someone else's words. It's not you pushing it, but can you expand on it?
Yeah, I mean, you've heard me say this before, right? Credibility, branding, presence. Those are the foundations that you must demonstrate to whomever you're working with, whether it be a customer or a prospect or an accounting firm, before you can even have the right, in my opinion, to ask for a referral. But a referral is essentially the highest form of acknowledgement that you bring value, that you are a value add beyond the product or service. Because invariably, there's always going to be somebody cheaper out there, or there may be a product that's perhaps better in terms of how it's priced, but at the end of the day, there's a value add for what we do, and it's a combination of in my opinion, the credibility that you bring, your presence and how you're adding value to the customer, but most importantly, the brand, right? And so I work for a great brand that has built itself mainly on growing through delivering great customer service, and as a result of that service, earning the right and most importantly, the privilege to ask for a referral. And so for me, building on those foundations of credibility, strong brand, and presence really drive the behavior that you want to see.
Now, one more question before you get to Elaine, because if I may. I'm sorry, Elaine, this is just an important one. Wall Street Journal just had a whole story about this, about keeping talent in-house, trying to hold on to talent in this environment, which is unique and tough in many different respects. Talent is a company trains its people, invests so much time into it, and yet there are challenges today in holding on to top talent. Perhaps you could just give some guidance on that.
My reaction, it's a people business. I talk to my entire team weekly, either in person or remotely. I talk to the people that report to me on a daily basis. I find it, again, to talk about referrals before, building a credibility with your teams, building a consistency of approach has been really important to us. We have worked really hard as a bank and as a firm to be a people company, right? And I think that theme starts from the top down, and we work really hard, and Elaine's a great example of that as our chief HR officer, to make sure that we're constantly looking out for our employees, but most importantly, endorsing and supporting their success and their achievement. And we spend a ton of time on training and learning, but most importantly, coaching and really being engaged with our employees. So, on that point, Elaine, let me welcome you to the show. That was a great segue, Yitzchok. It's great to have you here, Elaine, and really looking forward to having this conversation with you tonight. You run HR here at Investors, and to kind of build upon what Yitzchok was saying, can you speak a little bit about what's being termed in 2022 the Great Resignation?
Yes. Well, thank you for having me, everyone, and always good to see you, Mike. I think that, the Great Resignation is, a lot of companies, and not just banks, but just corporate America, are hearing from their employees that, flexibility is, extremely important. It's no more I sort of want to have it. It is I need it now. And I think having gone through the pandemic, I think people really, took a step back on their lives to see what was important and the balance that they need moving forward. And as a result, it really is a war for talent right now. And I think, culture is very important as well in terms of what people are looking for. When we engage with our employees, and just what you were talking about, Mike, relative to their careers and, making sure that we're having that connection with people. But culture is very important. Our connection to the community, how we value the talent, how we value diversity. And I think people today, especially if you're a frontline worker, I think that's where we're seeing, the majority of our turnover. And I think frontline workers are really evaluating where they want to be, the flexibility, what's important to them, and they want to connect to that company. And so that's a little bit about what we're seeing with the Great Resignation period.
And so building upon that, we get a little bit of resignation. I won't say a lot, but we get our share of resignation. How have we evolved, and how have you evolved the HR process in backfilling and recruiting talent these days?
Yeah, like most companies, we are out doing every possible thing we can through social media, through college recruiting. Referrals are a huge part of how we hire here at Investors. And so we are talking with our employees and making those connections. But, not unlike every other company, we are out there on social media doing everything we can. But it is about a personal connection with people. And when we bring people in, and how we are able to attract talent is really through the connection of our community to our managers, how we help develop their aspirations, how we meet their needs. So, we've done a pretty good job. And despite the slightly higher turnover that we're experiencing, we've been in a really good position, Mike. Investors has very deep roots in its community, and we are known for our culture among our people. And that word has certainly spread, and it's left us in a good position to keep competing for the talent in the market.
Now, Elaine, just a key question, which is, I guess, to a degree, a source of frustration, right, is that the CDC changes their guidelines on a frequent basis. Meanwhile, you're running branches. You have over 150 branches in the entire New York, New Jersey area. How do you how do you keep up with that, and how do you, and pushing out the information, letting people know, keeping everyone up to date? How do you manage that?
Well, we've been awesome communicators from the start. So, when we started out with the pandemic, we made a commitment to talk to our people on a weekly basis. So, I'm very blessed to have a great legal team and a great benefits team who help me monitor all of these, changing rules and regulations. I think it's also about the attitude that we have toward those changing regulations. It's frustrating. I can't tell you it is not, as there are different rules for different counties or different states. But in the heart of it, we believe that the CDC, federal and states, are all trying to protect lives. And at the core of what I do, my job throughout the pandemic, not only to shepherd our team, but really was to protect our team.
Right.
I embrace all of the changes personally, and I make sure they're well communicated because I know it's going to save lives. So for me, it's about having a positive attitude about the changes.
Our amazing lineup tonight is Mike McIntyre, Director of Business and Government Banking at Investors Bank; Elaine Rizzo, Chief Human Resources and Learning Officer at Investors Bank; Richard Goldstein, Senior Tax Principal at Berdon LLP; and Karen Bennett, Chief Human Resource Officer at Berdon LLP. Tonight's show brought to you in part by Investors Bank, member FDIC, and Berdon LLP. Well, Richard, great to have you back on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's jump right in. Let's talk about telecommuting. Now, there's a vantage point of from the business itself, how they compute taxes for their employees that are not working on site, and then you have the employee side, right? That how do they file their income taxes? Where is their domicile, etc. Perhaps you could break that out and explain it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting, and we're living in interesting times. With telecommuting is now pervasive. Not that it didn't exist before, but we're in a whole new world of telecommuting, and the telecommuters are facing things that they never had to think about before. The big one, double taxation, right? I work in somewhere in the Midwest, but my office that I report to is in New York. My employer's in New York. So, naturally a person's going to think, well, I work in Iowa, okay, or fill in the blank, right? That's where I'm gonna pay my income taxes to. But no, there's a number of states. New York is one of them that require non-residents to pay income tax to the state, like the state of New York. If your primary office is there, it doesn't matter where you're telecommuting from. And that's especially an issue when you're dealing, with an employer that only has, say, an office in New York, because that's your office. There isn't any other office.
Right.
Let me give you an example that, to make this, to flesh this out a little bit, because it is a weird concept, right? So imagine that, you are telecommuting from a state that doesn't even have an income tax, like Florida, right? And lucky you're in Florida. You don't have to pay state income taxes, but your office is here in New York. Well, as I had said before, under the New York rules, that income is sourced to New York. You got to file a non-resident income tax return and pay New York taxes, and that's a big surprise. But it can be worse. It can be much worse. You could be living in a state that also has an income tax, right? And as I mentioned up front, the state where you're working has, logically every right to think that you're going to pay your taxes to them. After all, you're sitting there in your home office, working away on your computer, holding conference calls, doing all your business in their state. But no, so New York, in that instance, is a state that would say that, no, you've got to pay tax to us too. So now you're in an untenable situation. Are you really going to pay taxes to two states?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is maybe you will. Without a little bit of advanced planning, there are some ways to manage the situation. We could talk about that for hours, but the devil's in the detail, and we have so many states and so many different scenarios. Take a state like Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania also has a rule very similar to New York's. If you're working at your home, you're telecommuting, but let's say your main office is in Pittsburgh, right? So Pennsylvania wants its tax, but unlike New York, Pennsylvania has tax treaties with a number of states like New Jersey, Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Maryland. So they offer some protection, and in those states, they've all agreed for the benefit of the employees to only tax the individual in the state where they are a resident. And that's how it gets worked out. So I think that's pretty interesting and pretty concerning at the same time.
So Richard, it's Mike McIntyre. Great to have you on here, and I want to build on the state question, because this is one clearly as people are getting ready to file for their 2021 tax return. I suspect that this is going to become an increased area of angst for them. Telecommuting and the implication on states. What can somebody do in the short term to be better prepared to address this?
Well, I think it's really it's a great question, and it's something that needs to be done at the employer level. The employers need to begin to think about the fact that they have a multi-state workforce, and in order for there to sort of be peace between the employees and employers, you want you're in an untenable situation to tell your employee, look, as an employer, I'm obligated to withhold in New York State because, this is the office out of which you're based, but I'm also obligated to withhold in another state where you're working, because under that state's laws, you're working there, you have to pay tax. So it's really the employer that, has to do thinking about it. One of the solutions, and again, there's all different solutions, and every, particular circumstance needs to be addressed very specifically and uniquely. But, one of the concepts is, well, maybe you open an office in a state, unlike New York and Pennsylvania and Delaware and a few other states, that don't have this, what's called the convenience of the employer test, which is the thing I just spoke about, where you're working at home, but you're paying tax to the other state. And maybe you open a satellite office and all your telecommuters are based out of that office. That's, a potential solution. There's a lot of web you have to weave to get through that, and it won't work in every situation. There are other solutions as well. But as far as the employer is concerned, their economic footprint has changed dramatically, their tax footprint, because by and large, in the United States, where a business is required we're required to withhold income taxes on employees, is required to file business income tax returns, is required to register to collect sales tax. That's determined by something called nexus. And for the most part, nexus means, do you have an employee in the state? Do you have physical presence in the state, which could be an office, property, inventory? And in some instances, economic nexus, we could spend a whole episode on that, so we won't go there. So, but imagine this, suddenly, maybe you had employees in 5 states before, you had offices in 3 states, and now you have employees in 15 states. You went from nexus in 3 states to nexus in 15 states for withholding income tax, sales tax, business taxes, excise taxes. That is something that needs to be thought through the beginning, not at the end, because that presents surprises that none of us, not happy surprises, right? When the auditor comes knocking. So yeah, it's a different world for employers. It's a much more complicated world for employers in state tax compliance.
So let's talk a little bit then about businesses themselves, right? So obviously, Berdon does a great job in supporting, middle market and commercial businesses, as well as the individuals behind those companies, and Investors Bank does the same. And as we've talked about over the last couple of years, how businesses have evolved to try to stay alive and to stay around. They've become more digitally engaged. They've been able to do things outside of brick and mortar. Define revenue sourcing. This is becoming a bigger and bigger topic for business owners. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
And it's a bigger and bigger topic for businesses. It's a bigger and bigger topic for state governments, because the state taxes is the state's revenue. So the basic concept in the United States in state taxation is that any type of income sourcing that the state has in its provisions, its statutes, has to meet certain constitutional standards. The basic concept boils down to 2 methods, for the most part, of sourcing. You can allocate income to the place, the headquarters, right, the commercial domicile of a company, and that's usually done for sort of passive income, interest, dividends, things of that nature. But for active business income, your bread and butter sort of stuff, right? It's usually done based on two different types of fractions. One is called receipts sourcing, which is, it's pretty simple. It's a simple fraction. You have a numerator, you have a denominator. The denominator is all your receipts, all your income, all your gross receipts. The numerator is what was earned in that particular state. And then, in simplifying it, you multiply your income times that number. 10% that's a 10%. 10% of your income goes to that state. And then there's another one, which has 3 sources. It looks at where's your payroll, where's your property, where's your receipts. 3 fractions. If each one of those is 10% in the state, then that state gets 10%. But the rules aren't exactly the same in each state. And so you can get situations where the same receipts are sourced to more than one state, a situation you want to avoid with a little planning if you can. And then there's one other issue that's important, which is, how do you decide where the receipts are going in that numerator? How do you decide what is in state? Some states say, depends where the work's done, right? That's called cost of performance. Other states say, depends where is the market for your services? If it's services, say you're a law firm and you only have a law office in New York, right? But you're consulting on a contract for building a building in California, right? Well, under California's laws, those receipts may be California because the market, the benefit is being received in California where the building's being built, as opposed to where the work is being done sitting at your desk in New York. So, so there you have conflict because you can have one state doing it one way, another state doing it another way, both claiming the same receipts because they're using different rules.
If I may, I wanted to actually turn to Karen Bennett now. Before we heard from Elaine Rizzo, Chief Human Resources Officer at Investors Bank. But now I want to turn to Karen because from your perspective, I mean, the dynamics of recruitment have changed drastically during COVID, and hopefully now we are post-COVID. What are some of the things you're seeing and some of the tips and recommendations that you can give to companies out there on this delicate yet such an important subject?
Yes, well, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a great question also. In all my years of being in HR, I haven't seen a market like this before. Recruiting has changed significantly since the pandemic. It's become a year-round function for most firms, and not just on the responsibility of HR, but also for the leaders in the organization and management getting involved. So first, you have to meet with a lot more candidates to find the qualified talent. And because the pandemic has made a lot of people reevaluate the type of work that they do, who they work for, what they want to do, the hours that they work, it takes a lot of effort from everyone involved to find the quality candidates. So talent acquisition is always a key part of HR, but during and post the pandemic, I definitely see it as one of the number one challenges. So the national talent market is definitely going to be key. And opening up your positions to be hybrid or remote and putting them out there to candidates across the states will definitely increase your applicant flow and help you get more candidates through the door. And we've been very successful at Berdon, hiring talent at all levels from different states, and again, through all different areas within the firm. One of the other things that I see that we're not going to go back to is the in-person interviews as much anymore. Being able to interview candidates through Zoom and Teams has really been effective, saves time and effort from everyone involved. So I think that's been a game changer, and that also helps in terms of making offers to getting candidates the offers to acceptances in a quicker rate. So that also has helped significantly. Another area, though, that I've been seeing is really just an inflation of salaries. And this is across many positions and many industries. You need to ensure that you're paying your talent very competitive market rates for their salaries. So some employers are doing sign-on bonuses in addition to being competitive. It keeps the salaries manageable, and it also attracts candidates. And some of the things that we do in-house for us at Berdon, we offer bonuses for client referrals. So if an employee brings in a client, they're able to get a bonus for that. And also, we have a very generous employee referral bonus program. So if a candidate can refer somebody and we hire them, we're happy to pay them the finder's fee versus maybe some recruitment firms or some recruiting agencies.
Wow, that's also a great tip. Because if someone's at the company and presumably they're very happy there, and then they should, if they turn to a friend and they get them to join. Yeah, that's, and the company is giving them, a referral bonus to boot. So great,
it's a win for everybody.
It's a win for everyone. And usually you'd wind up getting someone who's again, the person who's referring is part of the team, believes in the corporate culture, and usually people's friends are similar to the way that they are. So it's like win-win all around.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, Karen, you touched on this, but maybe I could still hold on to this for another minute. These days, things that used to be abnormal are now normal. Can you tell us some other tips about the new norm for remote versus in-person from an HR perspective?
Sure. So since the pandemic, employees are ranking company culture and work-life balance just as important as the traditional benefits and compensation packages that they're getting. Candidates want to know, what is the firm going to offer me? Where is my work location? What are the work hours? Are there core business hours? Can I dictate my own hours? So the traditional schedules of 9 to 5 in an office aren't the typical norm anymore. And most of the candidates are now requiring flexibility. So at our firm, we've had several of our employees from full-time go to part-time hours because it was more of a convenience for them to handle, family matters during the pandemic. But I've also seen some of our part-time people go to full-time hours because now they're fully remote and they're able to dedicate more time to work because they don't have to commute. So it kind of works both ways. But when we do go back to the office, and I do see that happening more in a hybrid approach for most of us, it's going to be a different environment. And I really view the future office environment as a destination. And basically what I mean by that is a place that we all go to have meetings, to meet with clients, maybe meet with new hires, have social interactions, have events. And then when we go home and work on our work from remote days, that'll be more of like the core work that we do, and kind of, not as many social interactions, but more kind of focusing on the day to day. So as a result of the new normal and employees being either hybrid or remote, firms are going to have these two groups of employees. So training and development are really going to be important, as well as employee engagement. Teams have to know how to effectively manage each other, and managers have to know how to ensure that they're communicating not just to the people that are in the office with them potentially, but also to their teams that aren't with them and that are remote. We do regular town halls in our firm as a way really to ensure that we're flowing communication across all levels and everybody kind of knows what's going on. So it's going to be very important for everyone to treat their employees equally, all firms to look at everyone, regardless of their work schedule, whether they are remote or hybrid, and treat everybody fairly so that they all feel that they're part of the culture in the firm. It's going to be very key.
Karen, before we go to a commercial break, just on that note about the town halls, I'm like excited about that. How important is it to have ongoing and clear communication, especially a firm like yours, over 400 professionals? How important is clear communication on an ongoing basis? How critical is that?
It's definitely critical. And we actually incorporated a new program called Berdon Hub. It's basically a program that we have where we meet regularly with our new hires and our remote staff, and we have virtual lunches, tea-building activities, discuss different firm initiatives to ensure that everybody's aware of kind of what's going on and how they can really be part of the firm. We also do a lot of employee engagement surveys. That's really important to really take a pulse and see, how your firm is doing, from DE&I to leadership to communication. What are we doing well? What areas can we improve on? So that's also definitely a key to being successful and making sure that you're communicating well with your staff. And as one of my main objectives as CHRO is to make sure that our people do feel that they are part of an inclusive culture and that they do belong and feel part of the firm.
We're speaking with professionals at Investors Bank and Berdon LLP. A special thank you to all those who give me feedback on a regular basis. I know tonight's show is quite important. In fact, if I may say, even critical for small to medium-sized businesses. We're talking about, and in case you tuned in late, no worries, this show will be up on the podcasting channel by Tuesday, but we're talking about HR, remote work, and taxes redefined now that we are, as they say, please God, post-pandemic. We all hope we are on the other side. I'm going to open by turning to the HR experts on tonight's show. Elaine Rizzo, Chief Human Resources and Learning Officer at Investors Bank, and Karen Bennett, Chief Human Resource Officer at Berdon LLP. Elaine, Karen, you're both dealing with different HR changes and challenges. However, I'm sure there's got to be some similarities, some patterns that you're both seeing in that regard. Perhaps first I could turn to Elaine and then to Karen.
Yes, I think, I sit on several different boards and certainly councils across the New Jersey and New York area, and I think we're all seeing very similar types of, issues from engagement, how you connect your new hires to learning and development. Are you going to be a hybrid environment? Are you going to be fully remote? What are the challenges in bringing people back? I mean, that is one of the things we're spending a lot of time on, throughout the councils I sit on, and certainly here at Investors. Just, how do you engage your workforce back, make them feel safe? So I think we're seeing a lot of similarities across the business. It doesn't matter whether you're in tech or in a bank. We're all experiencing very similar challenges and helping one another, navigate through those challenges by sharing and creating, great ideas and strategies. But certainly that's what I'm seeing out there, setting aside the remote and flexibility issues, which everybody is experiencing from their workforce of what they want for the future. But, it is about their engagement, how we move our culture forward. And those are all still challenges today.
And now I turn to Karen. Yeah,
I agree with everything you're saying. I think the tight labor market, though, is probably one of the biggest connections I think that we have and that a lot of employers are seeing right now. One thing that we've been doing is just being a little bit more broad in terms of our job descriptions and the candidates that we do bring in. So I think for most firms, if you see maybe 2 out of the 4 key attributes that you are looking for in a candidate, and just know that you might have some training and some staff development to help get them, to the next level. I think that's helped also in terms of bringing people in and giving the development that they need. Because you don't want to miss somebody that's really bright, that really can add a lot of value, even though they don't have the exact experience. And that's helped us also.
Karen, Elaine, it's Mike here. The pandemic isn't one event, right? It's been ups and downs throughout the last 2 years, right? And so what may have worked in March of 2020 may not work in March of 2022. How have each of you been able to maintain and keep motivated the various employees that are in your groups across your organizations? Karen, I'll turn over to you first, and we'll go to Elaine.
Sure. So I think one of the core areas that we paid a lot of attention to during the pandemic, and I know that we'll continue to focus on as a standard practice, is basically more mental health support to our employees. All of us have had struggles during the pandemic, health concerns, family issues, even the social and political climate. It's been a lot for everyone to deal with. And all of these factors take a big toll on employees and employers in terms of productivity. We've had an EAP program, which is basically an employee assistance program that our employees and their families can use to get help with counseling, find services, referrals, all these different types of services available. But we really expanded on that during the pandemic. We had a lot of well-being seminars, seminars focused on coping strategies, time management, stress management. We've had online yoga classes that were really well received, and access to other types of paid sites that give them discounts to, gyms or health, healthy food type vendors. So that's also been very, very appreciated. We also do meal allowance perks for our staff during, peak times, which really helps just to have one less thing to think about when you're, in the throes of work and there's so much going on. To not have to think about that is also, definitely a plus. So we're really just considering all the other factors in our employees' lives that we need to try to help them with, and however we can support them, that's what we're here for. And I don't see a lot of these types of benefits going away post-pandemic.
Great. Elaine, I'll turn over to you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with what Karen said, and I think those are all the right areas to focus in. And certainly throughout the pandemic, we have done many similar things. But I will say Investors has one of the most unique cultures. And not only have we, from our DE&I council, really helped continue to celebrate cultural events. Our women's leadership group in particular zoned in on how to help people through change, really focusing, Karen, like you said, on the mental and well-being of each of our employees. We also did, and we have a culture department. We're very unique in that we have a culture officer, Dennis Budnick, who's phenomenal, and his team. And I will say that he has kept this culture going. We do all kinds of, really fun things like sing-alongs and family night, and how we engaged not only our employees, but their family and their children through a massive amount of virtual events. And really, I'm so grateful to Dennis and all of the help that he's provided to the bank during this pandemic, because I'll tell you, we had as many as 800 or 1,000 people on, kids singing songs. It was wonderful. And so, we're very unique, and probably one of the few companies I know that have a culture officer, but they did a phenomenal job. It was a lot of fun. And I think culture continues to be very important in the future of how you engage your remote workers and how you make them part of the company. And certainly with all the things that HR does and learning and development and all of those connections, but there is a personal connection that you build through these types of cultural events, both at the DE&I level, women's leadership, any type of organization that sits underneath our DE&I council. But this certainly having some fun and engaging families has been just, I think enormously helpful to our population.
You're listening to another great episode of Mind Your Business on 710 WOR. Let's talk about recruiting. I mean, both firms here have had to go out and hire talent over the last 2 years, and no easy task, no easy assignment here to get that done, given where we've come from the last 2 years. Elaine, I'll turn over to you first. How have recruiting practices changed over at Investors?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the most difficult thing for us in the beginning was just to take everything virtual and to get that wasn't all that hard in that we had teams and we had, certainly different ways of technology to use, but was really getting people comfortable with that interview process, to really be able to speak with that candidate, have the same experience, and then even engaging our managers and how to get comfortable with interviewing, over the virtual environment. I think that was a huge challenge in the beginning, and that's certainly gotten better and better. But that was one of our biggest challenges from a recruiting. I think the great news is for all of us, we've been able to expand our talent searches beyond, the New Jersey and metro area. And so if you are open to hiring people and have them be remote, you now can expand to, 50 states. And I was just looking through some job boards last night just to see if I opened up, a search for this job and just said United States, how many jobs came up. It was crazy. The same number of jobs I saw, advertised in New York were advertised throughout the U.S. And so, recruiting is just changing every minute, getting comfortable with the virtual environment, making sure that our managers feel comfortable in that hiring. I think all of those have been challenges, but we're working through it. We certainly have had enough practice over the last, year or two, so it's getting better. But I'll let Karen answer that.
And Karen, as I turn to you, when I think about accounting firms and professional firms, I think about the old tablecloths in the college cafeteria where all the firms were around the horseshoe looking to give out applications for new hires and for college grads. Most colleges have been remote or hybrid the last 2 years. How has Berdon been able to attract new associates and onboard talent?
Sure. So we really have a large on-campus, footprint. We go to 15 or more different colleges and universities each year. We hire probably over 50 or so full-time and interns every year also. So the transition from being in person, and I do like those career fairs with the tablecloths and the pens and all the tchotchkes that you give out, but all of that went remote. And it really was an adjustment for the employers, the career offices, and the students for year one. It was definitely difficult. It was a lot more time and effort, logistics-wise. It was a challenge, but there were definitely a lot of benefits to the virtual component. A lot of the students felt more comfortable just talking to employers in that type of format. We were able to branch out, like Elaine mentioned, to universities all across the states and not just kind of local or tri-state area schools. We were able to do a lot of one-on-one events with students because we didn't have to work with the career offices. We were able to do it through the software platforms that we use. So there was a lot more student engagement and a lot more interaction that we maybe didn't have in the past with some universities. And also the employee branding that we were able to do, directly to these candidates through the online tools really were helpful in getting our message across of who we are as a firm, what is our culture like, what can we offer you, not just the job description and kind of here's what you're going to do every day, but what else can we offer you and what else does this firm do that aligns with what they wanted to do and their values.
Now, as we're approaching the close, the time flies. We've had a great time and shared a tremendous amount of content, but I just would like to turn to Elaine, Karen, and then a final thought from Mike here about, and actually Karen brought this up before, and that is from an HR perspective, the importance of accommodating and having the discussions about the work-life balance. The pandemic gave people time to think about what's important in life, what do they want to put their energies into, what do they want to accomplish, and therefore that obviously has to balance with their day job, so to speak. So perhaps maybe Karen, you can elaborate that, then we'll turn to Elaine, and then we turn to Michael on a closing thought on that.
So work-life balance means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Some employees want flexibility to work a hybrid schedule, some days in the office, some out. Some want the opportunity to pick their hours. Maybe they log in the morning, take the afternoon off, and log back in at night. So employees really need to realize that everyone's personal situation is different. Their career goals and objectives are different. So you just can't have a one type of approach or a one type of agreement schedule to provide your employees. Candidates really are dictating now what they want, and we really have to listen to them. It's almost every candidate coming through the door is giving you what ideally they'd want to work in terms of how and where and hours. So it's definitely very important. One of the things that I really have noticed is the candidates really wanting to know what the firm's values are, not just the culture, but what are the firm's values. And, our firm has always been a very philanthropic, caring firm, and, expanding on our Berdon Cares program, which is basically a volunteer type of program that we have where our employees can go out and volunteer at different types of activities. We really are encouraging that, and we're actually allowing people more during the workday to do that, taking that time off to give back. Which has been really, very well received, and also, just makes people feel good that they're able to do something, and the firm's really happy to do that. So,
Elaine.
Yeah, I think during the pandemic, what people found out, and I think many companies found this out as well, is that they can do their job just as well from home as they could in the office. At least we have heard that, just so many times over and over again. And to be honest, we've had, a wonderful 2 years at Investors Bank, and our employees, I can't be any more grateful to our frontline workers and to our corporate workers who made this adjustment to go fully remote for a good deal of the pandemic. But people have realized I can do my job, and they're getting better at it. So in the beginning, I think people were distracted with their children, pets. I mean, I had several occasions during Zoom meetings to see the tails or barking of animals, but people have gotten better at it. They have established their home offices. They are much more in control of their day than they were at the height of the pandemic. So I think companies in general are getting more comfortable with the environment because they're seeing our employees can do the job, our earnings are great, and people are happy. And so those things all are going hand in hand. And I really believe people are getting better at it day after day in terms of working from home. I guess lastly, I would just offer that, companies have to also balance their business life. And while the market is demanding certain things and people want, to set their own hours, each company has to look at what is right for their business and how they serve their customers, what it is, how their culture is evolving, and they do have a say-so in how it all shapes up. And I think if they work with their employees and they, meet them halfway in what is this new world of flexibility, I think you'll come to a great outcome. And I can tell you at Investors, we've worked hard to maintain our hybrid environment. We've given people a lot of flexibility, and it has worked out very well. Now, our frontline workers, who I respect, so deeply for coming in every day, Investors Bank was open throughout the pandemic, and our frontline workers, they just rock, and they've done an amazing job. So thank you. I hope that helps answer the question.
Mike, we have around 30 seconds left. Final take here.
My thought is, work-life balance is highly correlated to customer expectations, right? And I think Elaine touched on it. For the majority of our customers, we didn't miss a beat. The branches and the front lines were open at all times, and we were able to deliver the value and service. For Berdon and their firm, I suspect that their customer sat scores are just as high as ours in terms of you're not missing a beat either, right? A lot of this, though, comes from the end user, right? The customer or the business. They've adapted in the way they perceive the value that financial services providers like ourselves and Berdon are bringing to these relationships every day. And at the end of the day, it's a relationship, right? And so we've evolved, our customers evolved, and the needs have evolved. And candidly, we've been able to maintain a very strong pace of results for both firms over the past 2 years.
What an amazing show. Mike McIntyre, Director of Business Banking at Investors Bank. Elaine Rizzo, Chief Human Resources and Learning Officer at Investors Bank. Richard Goldstein, Senior Tax Principal at Berdon LLP. And Karen Bennett, Chief Human Resource Officer at Berdon LLP. Tonight's show brought to you in part by Investors Bank, member FDIC, and Berdon LLP. Well, this wraps up a great edition of Mind Your Business. Again, by Tuesday, the entire episode will be up on all the popular podcasting channels. This wraps up a great edition of Mind Your Business. Tune in again next Sunday night for another great edition of Mind Your Business right here on 710 WOR. Have a successful week. Thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe to this channel and be notified every single time a new video goes live. Don't miss out on any of the weekly interviews that I have with top business leaders, sometimes Fortune 500 executives. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications.